say save, and it brings me back to edit the customer. How often do people edit the customer the second time? Versus how many times do they just say, okay, now let me go add a new customer? It's a horrible example of where people are going to want consistency. Normally the ones I hear are things like financial transactions. Because they're really important to be consistent. Until you actually go work for a bank and you realize that none of them are consistent. Most places people think they want consistency, they don't actually need it. And you can always fall back and you can use the pattern that we were looking at and give them consistency. But I would focus first on why they actually need consistency in the problem. Most of the time, they don't actually need it. They may think they need it. Like one of my favorites, I was actually asked to build a fully 100% consistent system with full locking on top of Oracle, and we needed serialized level transactions. Serialized all the way through. Because everything needed to be fully consistent. It was a warehouse management system. So normally when people give me this kind of thing, I like to ask questions. Because questions coming from the real world normally help them start thinking about things. And my question for these guys was, cool, we can make the system fully 100% consistent in Oracle. Only one problem. How do we get the people that are stealing stuff to check it out properly? And in any system where we're dealing with either networks or humans, you're going to not be fully consistent, and this happens.
Yeah, but for example, you have a, I don't know, CRM, and you just want to add a contact for a new person to your CRM, and you just enter first name, last name, save, and you see the list of the people. As the result of it, you click save, you go to the list of people, and you want to see the person you added on this list. Yep.
So now let me ask a question. Do you want to see it, or do you want everybody that uses the system to be able to see it?
No, just the person who added it.
Okay, so why don't I just put it in your session? That's another one of those tricks that I can use. Or, I can use the trick that we were talking about here.
The question is, how many tricks are there?
There are lots. As I said, it's like an hour-and-a-half long discussion. I mean, there are a lot of these kinds of tricks you can put on top and keep eventual consistency without people actually seeing it. Like 99.9% of the time, they'll never actually see your eventual consistency. But you're still eventually consistent. If you want to go back and you want to be fully consistent, you can do the trick that we were talking about right here. Just understand the moment that you do that, you open yourself to widespread outage. This is the problem with consistency. So any system, when I bring it down to its core, it's either going to be CP or AP. Well, it's going to be either CP, AP, or broken. There's no in-between here. And I love talking when people talk about cap theorem and how you can turn dials on it up and down. And no, you can't. At some point, we're going to end up in a situation. You're asking me for data, okay? He has the data.
I don't have, I drop data.
You drop data, yes. I'm network partitioned from it. So I'm not totally sure about the data that he has. I now have two options. I can either lie to you, or I can tell you you can't have it. There's no other options that I have. And that's what we start getting into when we start talking about all these eventual consistency things. I can start lying to you. I can start putting things in your session. I can start doing things just special for you. I can go through and I can just tell you this is the best information I knew as of 8 microseconds ago. It's probably good enough. But I may be wrong. And the question is, how good is my lie? How often will people see failures because of my lie? This is exactly what Amazon is doing when you go to use your credit card and it comes back in 100 milliseconds. They're lying to you saying we charged your credit card when we really didn't. But it works 98.7% of the time, and given the choice, I'd rather do that and lie to you than to have the opportunity where everyone starts running their credit cards, and all at once we tell 10,000 people over the course of a minute, no, credit card system down. You really have to pick between those two. It's widespread outage or possibility of information I gave you is not correct. There's also a model you can take, which is I am consistent if I can be. If I can't be, I fall back to eventual consistency. Think about the log we were dealing with here. You wanted to do a search for names, and the one that you just put in, I told you was number 6. And I keep coming back and I keep going number 5. And you're like, next time, number 5, and you're like, okay, this guy must be screwed. Okay, do the search anyway without all the data there, just because I don't want to keep my user sitting here waiting. Maybe you'll put a message up to the user and say, you know what? That thing may not be there, but I wouldn't do this, because how many times are they going to be searching for the exact same thing that you just put in? Now you're going to scare what percentage of users telling them about warning data may be eventually consistent. That's going to cause more support calls than the guy looking for the name that didn't find it. And to be fair, the guy who didn't find the name, he's going to call up and you're going to be like, have you tried hitting F5? Oh, yeah, it's there. Okay, cool, thanks. How many of those support calls are you going to get before he just starts hitting F5 for a minute? I mean, it's not just black and white. There's a lot of decisions you can make along the way in terms of hiding things. A lot of what people think they need to be consistent really doesn't need to be. But if you need full consistency, you can get it. Just understand the trade-offs that you're taking.
I think the problem here is that, current state gives you this comfort zone that once you add and have the transactions, they will all run smoothly with ease without any problems.
Until you try doing a migration.
Oh yeah, sure. But
Like, I need to migrate my database from one version to the other version on a production system. How well does that work?
no, I understand all the benefits of event sourcing. I get the notion of the idea. I understand it. I really like it. But there's this thing in the back of my mind saying there will be traps there, bears, and evil monsters. Because
Of course there will be. They'll just be different ones than what you're used to.
exactly.
You're comfortable with the ones when you deal with your SQL database.
Yeah.
You've learned how to fight them.
Exactly. So the problem
You're like a wizard level 7 with spells.
So we need your presentation. We did the presentation with all the traps and tricks and how to deal with them.
Most of them are relatively simple. The biggest, hardest ones to deal with are the ones where you really screwed up because you didn't know the model. And for instance, you got all of your aggregate boundaries wrong. And that's going to be really hard, and it's not just in an event source system, that's also in a document database. Has anyone here ever gotten all their document boundaries wrong in a document database and had to migrate documents? It's a really fun operation, let me say. Oh, and you need to do it while the system's running. All of these kinds of things can cause issues, but in general, I tell people that they shouldn't try new things at work. Unless it's something like really low value and your employer understands it's something that you're learning on and they're willing to throw it away. Core banking system, that's definitely the thing to try new ideas. That or the thing that monitors people's pacemaker. Or the thing that's supposed to set off the nuclear weapons. But go and try the stuff at home. I mean, how many of you guys have a home project that you work on? That you just do over and over again to kind of get an idea? I mean, I know some people like to build blog engines, other people. Blog engines are really bad for event sourcing. They don't have any complex logic inside of them. But go and try to grab your home project and try rewriting it in an event source model. You'll be surprised and maybe you'll fail. If you fail, try again. It's a hell of a lot better than failing on your project at work where now you have to somehow try to go pick up the pieces. Learning on the job is generally a bad idea.
Just last one. What do you, because you just, with comparison of these two models, you substituted like push for pull. And is there, in your opinion, any good place or architectural decision when to use push instead of pull? Because with push you always handle those problems that you described, yeah? That sometimes you don't know if it was really safe on the other end or that.
Well, I have to be careful about that, because are we talking about a conceptual push or a conceptual pull, and at which layer are we talking? Take an atom feed. An atom feed is a push that's implemented over a pull. At my application level, it's a push. I'm pushing events to you. But at an HTTP transport layer, it's a pull.
Okay, so conceptually, who is asking for the message or giving the message?
But I can get all the same benefits of a push conceptually with an atom feed as an example. That's why I'm saying it depends which layer you're on, because very often what you'll start finding is that at the conceptual level, I'm push, and then the next level down, I'm pull, and then the level underneath that, I'm a push again. And then underneath that, I'm actually a push. And then I'm a push again. And you start looking up and down that old stack that you probably learned in university, and you start realizing at each level you actually have a different conceptual model. And there's benefits to pushes and there's benefits to pulls. But usually I try to deal with them at a conceptual level. And at a conceptual level, pulls have issues. Like, and when I say pull, I mean like a get XYZ from you, as opposed to you pushing an event to me. And the biggest one for this is availability. If I have to ask you for information every time, what do I do when you're down? It's the same situation we were talking about here. You send me something, I go to talk to him, I ask him some information, and he doesn't have it. So do I reject your transaction now? Whereas if he was pushing me his updates, I'm going to use my own little local database for this, and when I get your message, I'm going to go off of this. And well, it may be 5 seconds old, but we're willing to take this as a risk as opposed to accepting the downtime. By the way, are you there the next 2 days? Because like, we're going to talk a lot about this stuff.
There was supposed to be that I won.
Okay.
There was a picture with some interesting engines, storages, and
Okay.
you know that one of them doesn't suck that much.
That's not what I said.
No?
Well, I said you're not cool if you're using these, with the, sorry, you're not cool unless you're using these, with the exception of one of them.
Okay.
My clicker stopped working. Any other questions?
Just last. Alright, no question.
Okay then, well, go ahead.
One question about event evolution. Because as I understand, everything is nice and fine, but what if events change? Will change?
So you have versions of event over time.
Yeah.
So on that website I mentioned before, DVCQRS, there's actually a 7-hour video or a 6.5-hour video. One of the things we talked about for about an hour is this exact question. My general answer I fall back to, you can do it with strong typing and upcasting version from versions. The easiest way to do it though is to put 2 rules on your events. 1, you can't rename things. 2, you cannot change semantic meaning. Because changing semantic meaning, you're just screwed at this point. You're a sensor, you're going, this is the temperature, this is the temperature. It's 21 degrees, it's 21 degrees, and then all of a sudden you tell me it's 74 degrees. Oh, you just changed semantic meaning from Celsius to Fahrenheit. Yeah, there's no way I can get around this problem. But aside from that, use weak serialization. Use something like JSON. And then what I can do is I can weak serialize on their side, or protobufs, everything optional. And basically, the code that's handling it looks at it and says, by the way, this thing is, it may not be there. Protobufs is actually nice in the middle because you can actually say like maybe 3 or 4 things are required if it just makes absolutely no sense that they're not there. Like here, the inventory item was deactivated. This is the ID. Well, if you don't have an ID, I mean, nobody could ever possibly understand this. So I might put a required on that, but in general, favor going back to optional. And basically, when people are deserializing it, they can deserialize it. They don't need to keep every version that's ever been serialized. And they can basically come back and look at the message, and if there may or may not be information there, they have to understand that there may or may not be stuff. And then everyone can look at it at every version. But you can do upcasting as well. In that video, it actually goes through how to handle the upcasting with types. But I don't normally do it that way. I normally go back to a weak or hybrid serialization scheme.
And even Java serialization has some things that help with that scale. You can cover Git methods, override methods for Git and write
Yep.
the version, and it works.
Good, I will thank you guys for having me out.